welcome you to this Bible study of the Banking Blessings Ministry. My name is Goodluck Ofebu, and this is my wife,
Obi Ofebu.
We welcome you to our continuing study on responding to adversity, and we have been focusing on Paul's persecution in Jerusalem, leading to trials in Jerusalem, Caesarea, and eventually taking him to Rome. One of the things we have learned in our study on responding to adversity is that one of the things we have to do, even when we are facing adversity, is to remain committed to worshiping and serving God. And always bear this in mind, and always in every situation ask ourselves, what does worshiping and serving God demand that we do in this situation? And we respond according to that. Well, we know that one of the things we're supposed to do is to respect established authority. One of God's mandates. Paul preached this in several of his letters, and Peter talked about it. We'll look at one of the discussions in Peter, that we are expected to respect established authority, because the established authority is one of the ways that God establishes order in society. It is through established authority that He establishes lawful interactions among people. Well, one way that the established authority interacts with us, one way that they do what they do, is to establish a body of rules and regulations that define how things are done, that define how people interact with each other, that define the limits of human behavior. There are certain things you can do under certain circumstances. There are established ways to handle different circumstances. And this is what we refer to as due process. We are going to look at Paul's trial in Caesarea, because there we will see that Paul submitted fully to due process, and in fact relied on due process, relied on protection under due process to defend himself during the ordeal that he faced in Jerusalem and in Caesarea. We will learn that submitting to due process actually involves two things. One is commitment to follow the applicable rules and regulations. Commitment to follow due process. But at times it's quite complicated. At times it is simple. At times it is complicated. And we find that using the appropriate level of the appropriate competence in each case will be required. It's not just, yes, you can commit to follow the applicable rules and regulations, but you have to understand the rules, or you have to have somebody that understands the rules to guide you. So, commitment to follow the rules, competence to follow the rules are the two aspects of submitting to due process. And we'll find an example again through Paul's trial in Caesarea. We'll find that through all these trials, starting in Jerusalem through Caesarea, Paul submitted to due process and relied on protection under due process to defend himself against the persecution of Jews and that he faced during the period. We will use information from Acts chapter 25 verses 1 to 26 and other related passages to try to understand especially how Paul submitted to due process in his trial, and then see how we can apply this to our present day life. Hi, honey. You have something to say at the beginning?
What I have to say is that it's going to be interesting because oftentimes, as children of God, or people who have been called to, do the work of the kingdom, or as Christians in general, we feel that when we have adversity or when we feel that we are falsely being subjected or not unlawfully, falsely being accused, and then we are being subjected to the laws of the land, that we don't have to follow through because what we're doing is the work of God and all that. That's not a license for us not to obey or take part in the due process of work. So long as it's not a sin that you're going to commit, or so long as it's not something that will cause you to forsake your faith, then the laws of the land is there to bring order the way that God wants it at that time. So it's going to be interesting for us to see that even the early apostles, did this, and so we'll have to see what we learn from it.
Yes, very well said. Well, let's proceed with just going through the entire, picking examples of how Paul submitted to due process through his ordeal. We remember the case where he asserted his citizenship rights to avoid torture. They were going to whip him, and he turned around and said, "Is it lawful for you to for you to flog a Roman citizen who has not been found guilty of an offense?" That again is showing, it's using his knowledge, his understanding of due process to protect himself. Really, if you think about it, there he had to know. Well, he knew he was a Roman citizen, but he had to know that one of the tenets of the Roman Empire was that people have to be given a trial, they have to be given opportunity to defend themselves, and they will not be punished until they've been found guilty. So Paul knew this, and he applied it right there. So that is seeking protection under due process. When it was brought to his attention that there was a conspiracy against him, he directed the information to the commander, knowing that the commander was the only person that had the authority to deal with the matter. Then, of course, we know about his trial under Governor Felix in Caesarea. He submitted fully, participated fully in the trial. Now you say, oh, he didn't have a choice, he had to participate. Well, actually he had a choice. Remember, at this time, Jesus stood before him, in Jerusalem, and told him, "Don't worry, we are going to Rome. Don't essentially, be calm. Don't be worried. This thing will eventually. These people are not going to harm you. You are going to go to Rome and testify." So this would have made him say, "Look, why am I wasting my time in this trial? Let me just follow along. I don't have to put up a defense. I just let them do what they want because I'm going to Rome. God has told me that." But he realized, okay, yes, God told him he would go to Rome, but he didn't know how he would go to Rome. He didn't know when he would go to Rome. He didn't know what the circumstances. But he knew that there was a process going on, that he needed to represent himself fully in this process. He needed to participate. He needed to show respect to the people involved, but also participate fully, claim his right where it was necessary. And that's what he did. So he put himself, he submitted to the trial. And after they tried him, they could not find him guilty because Governor Felix concluded that he didn't really see what Paul did. Then there was the trial under Governor Festus. This is the one we are going to go through in detail today. So let's leave the details for now. But an important aspect, an important demonstration of Paul's submission to due process here is the testimony, his trial before King Agrippa. Now, at this time, Paul had appeared in a trial under Governor Festus and realized Festus was going to use him as a bargaining chip to buy favor from the Jews. So he appealed to Caesar. And Festus had concluded that he would be sent to Rome so that his appeal can be, so that Caesar would give judgment, the emperor himself would give judgment on his case. So at this point, Paul could have very easily said, hey, why am I going through another trial with Agrippa? It's not important. I have appealed to Caesar. My appeal has been accepted and I'm going to Rome. But he gave, if you look at the defense, we're not going to go through it in this Bible study. But you will see that he gave a detailed defense as if Agrippa was the ultimate judge. As if the case would be decided based on Agrippa's judgment. So he gave detailed, he defended himself in detail, talked about his experience with Jews, talked about why he was on trial, and then, of course, used the opportunity to minister to Agrippa. So that is showing himself, submitting fully to due process, even when he could have easily said, I'm not going to participate in this, it's not important, I'll just go through the motion. And of course, his appeal to Caesar, we are going to see, that was a case of him recognizing the jeopardy that was facing him and saying, okay, I've reached a point, I have to go the next step, because these people are not going to be able to find justice with these people that are trying me. So these are examples. Some of these examples we'll go through in this Bible study. Several of them we've gone through before, so we're not going to repeat them. Well, let us begin with Governor Festus explaining the due process, explaining what the procedure for trying somebody under the Roman administration. He said that, and this happened when he was presenting Paul's case to King Agrippa. He started by explaining that, look, under the Roman system, that an accused must be given opportunity to defend himself or herself against the accuser. That the accused must be given opportunity in a timely manner, which means there is a schedule. If it is trial in a court, there is a schedule that must be followed. You can't just postpone it forever. So the accused must be given opportunity in a timely manner to defend himself or herself, and cannot be condemned or punished until a trial has occurred under a competent authority. He explained this. We'll read about this and see. He wasn't really lecturing Agrippa on the process, but he was explaining he used this to explain his interaction with Paul, what he was doing with Paul, and why he needed Agrippa to hear Paul's case. Okay, let us look at this. Acts chapter 25, verses 13 to 21.
Okay, the book of Acts of the Apostles, chapter 25, verse 13, reading from the New International Version. A few days later, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea to pay their respects to Festus. Since they were spending many days there, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. He said, There is a man here whom Felix left as a prisoner. When I went to Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him and asked that he be condemned. I told them that it is not the Roman custom to hand over anyone before they have faced the accusers and have had an opportunity to defend themselves against the charges. Verse 17, when they came here with me, I did not delay the case, but convened the court the next day and ordered the man to be brought in. When his accusers got up to speak, they did not charge him with any of the crimes I had expected. Instead, they had some points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a dead man named Jesus, who Paul claimed was alive. Verse 20. I was at a loss how to investigate such matters, so I asked if he would be willing to go to Jerusalem and start trial there on these charges. But when Paul made his appeal to be held over for the emperor's decision, I ordered him held until I could send him to Caesar.
So with these words, even though he was talking about his interaction with Paul's case, what he really did was explain that there is a due process, there is a way that somebody accused of an offense had to be taken through a trial before any kind of condemnation. Well, what happened actually was Festus replaced Felix as governor and went to Jerusalem to visit with the people on his, know the people visit sort of. And there, the Jewish leaders came before him and requested that Paul be condemned without trial. They simply told him what they thought Paul did, and they asked him to condemn Paul and hand him over to them. He refused. Instead, he convened the court in Caesarea and said, okay, they should come to Caesarea and present their case against Paul. Okay. Now, in this trial, Paul represented himself. He knew the law, he knew the process, the trial process, and the system allowed self-representation. So he represented himself. But what we'll find here is that maybe in his own case, it was easy for him to represent, but in a lot of cases, that we will face in modern day society, you will find that at times you may need external professional representation of some kind. If it is something that is legal, knowledge of the legal process, knowledge of the due process, whatever it is, the applicable due process, at times will require that one look for a professional, one retain a professional representation. But for the trial in Caesarea before Governor Festus, Paul represented himself. The system allowed him to represent himself. It was during this trial that he realized, just by listening to what Festus was saying, questions he asked, that Festus asked him, he realized that Festus may be willing to use him as a bargaining chip to buy favor or seek favor with the Jews. So he felt that he could no longer rely on that system to get justice. He knew what the next step would be, and that is to appeal to the emperor, to appeal to Caesar. An appeal to Caesar is like an appeal to the ultimate court. It's in present day system, that may be like an appeal to the Supreme Court. So you see that this is not something this is not a light thing. It was quite involved, but Paul was knowledgeable in the law, so he could handle it right there on the spot. If in present day situations, we may not be able to do that. Let us read this in Acts chapter 25, verses 1 to 12. And one, if you want to jump in any time to say something, or if you want to say at the end, it's up to you.
It's okay.
Yeah. Okay, Acts chapter 25.
Acts chapter 25, verse 1. 3 days after arriving in the province, Festus went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem, where the chief priests and the Jewish leaders appeared before him and presented the charges against Paul. They requested Festus as a favor to them to have Paul transferred to Jerusalem, for they were preparing an ambush to kill him along the way. Festus answered, Paul is being held at Caesarea, and I myself am going there soon. Let some of your leaders come with me, and if the man has done anything wrong, they can press charges against him there. After spending 8 or 10 days with them, Festus went down to Caesarea. The next day he convened the court and ordered that Paul be brought before him. Verse 7. When Paul came in, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him. They brought many serious charges against him, but they could not prove them. Then Paul made his defense. I have done nothing wrong against the Jews, the Jewish law, or against the temple, or against Caesar. Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and start trial before me there on these charges? Paul answered, I am now standing before you, before Caesar's court, where I ought to be tried. I have not done any wrong to the Jews, as you yourself know very well. Verse 11, if however I am guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me by these Jews are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. After Festus had conferred with his council, he declared, You have appealed to Caesar. To Caesar you will go.
So Paul basically saw that, well, he felt, let me not say he saw, he felt that he could not rely on that system to get justice, that they were going to use him as a bargaining chip. And he exercised his right by appealing to the emperor. Well, what are the requirements for due process? What is the, as you can see with this example from Paul, is that submitting to due process requires knowledge, understanding of the due process, understanding of the things that you are supposed to do in different circumstances. What are your rights? What are the rights of other people? And it also requires an authority to apply the knowledge. You know, even if you understand it, the system may say, look, you cannot represent yourself. That means you don't have, yes, you have the knowledge, but you don't have the authority to apply it. So one needs to be professionally knowledgeable about the rules and regulations that are applicable to the circumstances, and then to have the professional authority, the certification to apply that knowledge, to use that knowledge in the proceedings. In the case of Paul, he had the knowledge, and the system had nothing against him representing himself. So he represented himself. He was competent to represent himself, and he had the authority to represent himself. In several situations that we face today, often you may find that you need external professional representation. and that is part of following due process. If it is something about the law, well, you hire a lawyer. If it is something about money, well, you look for an accountant. Each of these are ways that, there are a body of rules and regulations that we have to follow in every situation, and at times you may need professional representation in order to follow these rules and regulations. Well, just a little more about the basis for submitting to due process. These are the rules and the body of rules and regulations that define our interaction with authority. And we are supposed to respect established authority, because established authority is one of the ways that the society is run in an orderly way. Now, Peter preached about this in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 to 17, where he taught specifically about the respect for established authority, about obeying established authority. So let us look at 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 to 17.
Okay. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority, or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. 16. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor.
Well, so that is Peter preaching about respect for authority. Yes, Paul talked about it in several places. In fact, here, this lesson is showing Paul practicing it himself. He's not just talking about it. Respect for authority is important because that is one of the ways that God establishes order in a society, establishes an orderly ways of doing things, ways of interacting in an orderly way. What we learned today is that Paul submitted to due process during his trial throughout his ordeal, that persecution that started in Jerusalem, continued in Caesarea, and eventually will take him to Rome. Throughout that process, he submitted, those events, he submitted to due process, and not just to obey it, but also relied on protection under due process to defend himself. We saw about his appeal to the emperor. We saw about his using his Roman citizenship to avoid punishment without trial, and when it was necessary to protect him from the conspiracy of the Jews, he relied on due process by submitting the information to the Roman commander. We saw in the example in all of the examples, but particularly the one under Governor Festus, that Paul represented himself because he had the knowledge, he had the understanding, and the system did not object to him representing himself. It was a court hearing, so they could have said, you need a lawyer. But in several situations that we face in today's society, you often may need external representation in order to understand and follow due process as necessary. Honey?
One thing that jumped out to me in this teaching is the fact that though Paul he knew he was being unjustly held, he was being falsely accused, he submitted himself to whatever the law said, but he was not blind to, he was still alive to the Spirit in him.
Yeah.
Even though Jesus had told him that, it's like the prophecies we receive. Christ had come personally and told him, you are going to witness of me in Rome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the prophecy. That's what, he's going to do. But Christ didn't tell him how, when, or, this is somebody in jail, and you are telling him he's going to go to Rome. And Jesus left it at that and left. But Paul was still, alive to his spirit. And I believe that that's what made him, when he realized that Festus was going to hand him over, was going to be biased, hand him over to a court that is biased in order to please the Jews, he immediately said he's appealing to Caesar. And where was Caesar?
Rome.
Caesar was in Rome. Yeah. Okay? So sometimes our adversity is a vehicle to take us to the purpose.
Yeah.
If we listen to the Spirit, if we listen to the charge with it. Yeah. I had a beautiful teaching about prophecy and the charge, from, my mentor and my bishop, Bishop Bob Alonge. It just blew my mind that for every prophecy there is a charge. The charge will help you to get to the prophecy. And sometimes we just sit down and wait for the prophecy to fall into our laps, but there is a charge to the prophecy. Yeah. So Paul was alive to his spirit to know what the charge is. And he said, I appeal to Caesar. And he left it because, what's his name? Festus could have said, no, I ain't taking you to Caesar. Even though it was the right of every Roman citizen to appeal to Caesar. Yeah. But they could have found reason to say, no, I'm not. But God worked his purpose. Yeah. And Festus said, you have appealed to Caesar. To Caesar you will go. And that is the vehicle. This adversity is the vehicle that, took Peter to Rome. Yeah. So when we go through adversity, we could have said, these people will kill Paul. This will happen or that will happen. We might think that, don't see that adversity as the end, end of it all. It's not the end of it all. Yeah. So being alive to the Spirit, because the Spirit will guide you to what the purpose is and to things you can do lawfully, without trying to, it's not like, you're coming to smuggle you out or whatever, if that's what it will take. But, it's happened before. When it was the same Paul, when he was put in jail and then they were suddenly freed when they were
Paul and Silas. Yeah.
So if that's the way God wants to do it, it's going to happen anyway. Yeah. But in this case, whenever we see an adversity, let's look. I keep saying, let's look for the bigger picture and be alive to the Holy Spirit to guide us in our utterances, in our actions. Because Jesus has made the grace available. Yeah. All this, the grace will be able to carry us through. Yes. And then we emerge at the other end.
Well, This was a short Bible study, but we believe that the subject is important. It's important to realize our responsibility to remain children of God even in adversity. And part of remaining children of God is respecting established authority. And part of respecting established authority is following due process. We used Paul's experience to learn about this, and we hope that you read the passages that we encountered today in enough detail to understand and learn the lessons that we have identified for today. We pray that what you learn from this Bible study and from all the Bible studies we have done previously and all the ones we do in the future will make a positive impact on your life and will bring you closer to God's purpose for your life. We remind you that all our Bible studies are available at bankingblessings.org. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless you.